The 18-Day War. The last few days before the war passed slowly. The entire household at the Anga Palace was uneasy, the dark future looming ahead threateningly. Karna, Vrushali, Shona, Radha, Adiratha and the sons of Karna, except for Shakhthu, were like victims being prepared for the savage rites of a sacrifice. Her terror numbed Uruvi. She could not bear to let Karna out of her sight, her parched, dry eyes drank in the sight of him thirstily. It was only in the rare moments when he was with her that her courage came back and she clung to those moments to take her through the dark days. She had ceased to cry, the tears had long dried up. To shake off the vague terrors that assailed her, she prayed and worked fervently, spending longer hours at the rehabilitation camps. It was an escape from her ordeal, from her anguish. The endless days, one after another, dragged out their weary hours. The war was preordained, born out of hatred and fated to wreak unimaginable tragedy. The two sides of the warring cousins summoned vast armies and lined up at Kurukshetra for the battle that was to plunge everyone into endless sorrow. The kingdoms of Dwarka, Kasi, Magadha, Matsya, Chedi, Pandya, Yadis and Kamboja allied with the Pandavas. The allies of the Kauravas were in larger numbers, besides, of course, Anga, the kings of Pragyatisha, Kekaya, Sindhudesa, Mahishmati, Madra and Avanti and Madhyadesa joined the Kauravas, while the Kambojas, Gandharas, Balikas, Yavanas, Sakas and Tusharas also backed them. The army of the Kauravas was imposing with 11 divisions called Akshuhinis, while the Pandavas were severely outnumbered with a mere 7. One Akshuhini comprised 21,870 chariots with their riders, the same number of elephants and their riders, with 65,610 horses and horsemen and a staggering 350 foot soldiers. Each Akshuhini was under a general, and all of them under a commander-in-chief, Drishtadyumna of the Pandava army and Bhishma Pitamaha of the Kauravas. The mere sight of 4 million soldiers facing each other on the battlefield at Kurukshetra struck terror in the people of the Kuru kingdom who waited fearfully for the war to begin. On the first day of the Kurukshetra war, Dushasana led the Kaurava army and Bhima the Pandava side. The bugle signaling the beginning of the battle ripped the air with its terrible finality. Against the clamor of rumbling trumpets and reverberating conches, the horses neighed and the elephants trumpeted impatiently, eagerly waiting for the war to begin its deathly carnage. Death bared its fangs as never before, stinging each family and soldier with its venom. Thousands were butchered that day and in the next 17 horrifying days. Strangers killed strangers, brothers slaughtered brothers, cousins murdered cousins, uncles killed nephews and nephews massacred uncles. The learned gurus and the shishayas, the teachers and the pupils, learnt bloody lessons of murder and mayhem. The skies were torn with the wails of mothers, daughters, sisters, wives and orphans. Prowling jackals and watchful vultures ripped apart the slain soldiers and dead animals. On the very first day came a terrible blow. It was the death of Shona, at the hands of Nakul. Radha was almost out of her mind with grief. Seeing her plight, Uruvi wondered how Radha, Vrushali and herself would be able to bear the news of Karna's death one day. Karna was inconsolable, ridden with guilt, and reproached himself bitterly for being the cause of his younger brother's death. If it were not for me, he would not have been fighting a war, he would be safe, leading the life of a charioteer. Even if he were a charioteer, he would have gone to war. He died a hero's death. Uruvi said gently, trying to console him. Karna, in deep and bitter reflection, buried his face in his hands, in hopeless surrender. How much more are we to suffer? He sighed in a hoarse whisper, hot tears trickling steadily down his weary face. Each day brought worse tragedies. The death of the gentle Vikarna made even the Pandavas sad. Bhima was said to have wept uninhibitedly, moments before he killed his favorite cousin. I can never forgive myself. he cried in mixed pain and bitterness. On the 10th day of the war, the unthinkable happened. The mighty, invincible Bhishma Pitamaha was felled by an arrow from his great-grandnephew, Arjuna. Everyone on the battlefield stood shocked, not believing that the man who had been blessed with the boon to choose the time of his death could not escape a mortal's fate. As the grandsire had promised, he did not hurt either the Kauravas or the Pandavas. Duryodhana had often accused the old man of being biased, berating him for not actually fighting for the Kauravas after all. But he was the strongest barrier protecting the Kaurava army from impending defeat, said a crestfallen Karna, recounting to Uruvi what had occurred the previous night. The war was stuck in a stalemate with both the sides suffering equal losses. The 10th day was a threshold, it was a do-or-die moment, and the grandsire took it upon himself to force a decisive battle. I shall fight like a lion, and this time, either I will kill Arjuna or I will make Krishna break his promise not to wield any weapons himself during the war, he promised Duryodhana, with Karna silently witnessing every word of that vow. That day, there was a fierce battle between Bhishma and Arjuna. Although Arjuna was formidable, he was helpless under the frenzied attack of his grandsire. Bhishma Pitamaha viciously shot arrows which smashed Arjuna's armor and broke his Gandiva bow. Arjuna was simply powerless before the wrath of the old veteran. As Bhishma Pitamaha was dangerously close to killing Arjuna with his deluge of arrows, Krishna threw down the reins of his chariot and jumped onto the battlefield. He lifted a chariot wheel and charged towards Bhishma Pitamaha, breaking his promise that he would not pick up a weapon in this war, recounted Karna, his voice toneless. Arjuna finally managed to convince Lord Krishna to stop, but he explained that to protect his protege, he would readily break his own promise. Krishna returned to the chariot only when Arjuna vowed to redouble his determination and effort in the fight. Uruvi listened in horror as Karna continued. Knowing that the grandsire was vulnerable only against a woman, Krishna, on the 10th day of battle, brought in Shikhandi, Draupadi's transvestite brother, as Arjuna's charioteer, he said. Lord Krishna knew that the patriarch, if faced by a woman in battle, would cease to fight and not lift weapons against her. And the Pandavas agreed to this ploy to vanquish the grandsire. Using Shikhandi as his armor, Arjuna shot a slew of arrows at Bhishma Pitamaha, piercing his entire body, and finally, the grandsire gave up the fight. But that's unfair, cried Uruvi, aghast at the treachery of the Pandavas. I thought the Pandavas were upright warriors. Then she recalled the plethora of unfair means that had been shamelessly used before the war. The feud of the cousins, the burning of the Lak palace to murder the Pandavas and Kunti, the unfair division of the kingdom, the rigged game of dice, the shaming of Draupadi in the royal court, the exile, the deceitful way Karna was shorn of his kavach and kundals, the last desperate attempts by both Lord Krishna and Kunti to sway Karna against Duryodhana, and the vilest of all, revealing the terrible truth of his birth to Karna, thus stripping him of his last vestige of dignity. Why are we talking about morals and fairness? She asked defeatedly. This war is, in itself, an unethical one. Bhishma Pitamaha lay in the bloodied battlefield, his entire body held above the ground by a bed of arrows. It was a sight that humbled even the gods who watched from the heavens, revering and blessing the dying warrior, who had given up the fight but not his last breath, waiting for the auspicious moment to give up his body. Uruvi was invaded by another emotion. Mingled with her sorrow over the old patriarch's fall was the fear that his death would mean the end of Karna. He had promised her that he would save Karna until the last moment of his life, and by forbidding him to enter the battlefield, the grandsire had done his utmost to protect his great-grandnephew. Now, with the fall of the powerful Bhishma Pitamaha, the protective shield had vanished and Karna was vulnerable again. If Karna stepped onto the battlefield, it meant certain death for him, Uruvi realized with a heavy heart. From that hour onwards, Karna would be living on borrowed time. The fall of Bhishma Pitamaha spelt the Kauravas' nemesis, and for the first time, Karna joined their army in the battlefield. He announced his intention on that day, the Grand Sire, who possesses all the qualities of a good man and a great warrior, intelligence, prowess, honesty, self-restraint, humility and modesty, is now lying on a bed of arrows in the battlefield. Without his leadership, what is the use of so many Akshuhinis in the army? With the fall of Bhishma, Duryodhana has lost everything, cried Karna. The fall of Bhishma Pitamaha occurred even while all of you were on the battlefield. He fell with a mighty crash, like a mountain wood. But do not worry. I will save you and your forces. I shall attack Arjuna. I will vanquish the Pandavas and the entire Pandava forces, and ensure that Duryodhana is crowned as king. If I fail to do so, I will meet Bhishma Pitamaha in heaven. This is my promise, announced Karna. While his words relieved Duryodhana, Uruvi despaired at the finality of her husband's words. That evening, Karna told his worried wife, I need to meet Bhishma Pitamaha and beg for his forgiveness. With his blessings, I shall take part in the war from this day onwards. He left her in the camp, where she tended to the wounded soldiers, some dying, many screaming in agony. Hours later, she saw an inconsolable Karna returning to the tent. Only a sliver of the sun's ray pierced the purple darkness as another dawn was about to break. Karna's golden sunset eyes had darkened with trouble and anxiety, pain and bitterness. He stood tall, but no longer proud. His broad shoulders were slouched in a defeated droop. He looked utterly crushed. He, too, knew who I am, Karna said, looking sadly at her. He blessed me as Kunti's son. He hoped that with his passing, the enmity between the cousins would end and that I would return to my Pandava family. Oh, Uruvi, how much more do I have to suffer? Karna sighed in bleak hopelessness. I told him that though I know that I am Kunti's son and not a Sutaputra, I could not turn my back on Duryodhana. I had to be true to him and his friendship, to my own lineage and to my convictions. I would repay with my life for all my mistakes in word and deed. Uruvi touched Karna's hand soothingly. He continued, Bhishma Pitamaha looked infinitely sad but blessed me with these words, O Karna. With your support and help alone is Duryodhana safe. You are considered his brother, but friendship is greater and deeper than any relationship by birth. You bear the entire burden of this Kuru dynasty. There is no difference between Duryodhana and yourself. You both are equal to me. Command the Kaurava forces and achieve victory. You are as dear to me as Arjuna and Duryodhana. In fact, you are dearer, as great injustice had been meted out to you. Don't ask for forgiveness from me, I ask for your forgiveness, child. Hearing those words from the grand old man, Uruvi, I died 1,000 deaths. I have never felt happier, more pained, more ashamed. I was happy that he loved me and respected me as a warrior, but the pain was because it came so late. Everything's too late now. Can even death release me from this misery? He said hoarsely, grief etched on his face. And is this the same misery I shall bequeath to you and our son? He looked fixedly at her for a long, indeterminate moment, his glance searing through her soul, staring past her. Strong emotions crossed his face as he smiled sadly and walked away. On the 11th day, Karna entered the battlefield, but not as the commander-in-chief. He requested Duryodhana to choose Guru Dronacharya as the new chief to command the Kaurava army. Though reluctant, Duryodhana did not disagree with his friend. The focus of the Kaurava attack was now to capture Yudhishthira alive, so that they could win the war as early as possible. But with Arjuna fiercely protecting his older brother, this seemed too ambitious a strategy, as several unsuccessful attempts proved. The 12th day saw the beginning of doom. The placid, mild-mannered Lakshmana, the only son of Duryodhana, was killed by Abhimanyu. Uruvi recalled the honorable, honest prince, loved dearly by everyone. She remembered how each day the young prince, the unlikely son of a father like Duryodhana, would meet the people of Hastinapur and try to alleviate the suffering of the needy. He was more of a saint than a prince, but destined to die the death of a brave warrior. Bhanumati was numb with shock and Duryodhana was devastated. I shall give the Pandavas half of the kingdom now, he wept, as he knelt near the motionless body of his young son. I did not want this gentle boy of mine to fight the war because, like you, Uruvi, he hated war and bloodshed. I did not want him to die, he was the heir to my throne. He was the only young survivor of the Kaurava family. Uruvi, remember how he, Bhanumati and you had begged me not to allow Krishna return empty-handed from the Hastinapur court when he had come to mediate between us and the Pandavas. Lakshmana had implored that we give the Pandavas at least 2 villages, but I did not listen to him or Bhanumati. Oh, now I would give them the kingdom if it could bring my boy back. He cried heartbrokenly. It was the love of a father in all its poignancy that spoke, but Uruvi wondered if Duryodhana really had any desire to stop the war and give away the kingdom. However, she conceded, in his time of grief he had at least owned up to his responsibility for waging the senseless war. The Kauravas mourned the death of the young prince and vowed revenge on young Abhimanyu, clamoring for the killer's blood. But the brutality with which Arjuna and Subhadra's 16-year-old son was butchered shocked everyone. A new strategy was opted for on the 13th day. To distract Arjuna and get him away from Yudhishthira, who was to be captured alive, Guru Dronacharya and Duryodhana made the Samsaptaka's division, consisting of warriors from the kingdom of Trigarta, attack Arjuna fiercely, pushing him away from the main front. Meanwhile, the full Kaurava army concentrated on capturing Yudhishthira by rearranging the army in the Chakravya pattern, a defensive formation in the shape of a lotus. The teenaged Abhimanyu was called for help as he was the only one who knew how to penetrate the labyrinth of the Chakravya besides great warriors like Krishna, Arjuna, Karna, Balarama and Pradyumna, Krishna's son. Abhimanyu had dared to enter the Chakravya at Yudhishthira's request, but he could not retreat and got stuck in the midst of a pack of bloodthirsty fighters. Jayadratha, the king of Sindhu and the husband of the only Kaurava princess, Dushala, had cleverly cut off Abhimanyu's backup assistance from Yudhishthira and his army by surrounding them at the entry point of the Chakravya. Surrounded by 6 fearsome warriors, Guru Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Karna, Ashwadhama, the veteran Brihatbala and Kritvarma, the Boha king and cousin of Krishna, the young lad died fighting, sacrificing his life as he tried to protect the life of his uncle, Yudhishthira. Kritvarma had been Abhimanyu's teacher, but could not forgive his pupil's one transgression. His son, Matrakavat, had been killed by Abhimanyu and the unforgiving father had finally exacted his revenge by joining in the gory killing of the Pandava heir. Uruvi was filled with dismay. When she met Karna at the end of the day, she asked him sadly, "How could you, as a decent human being, a noble warrior yourself, kill Abhimanyu in that merciless way?" Her heart cried out more in revulsion than in pain. He was but a child, a little older than our Vrishakhthu. All you great warriors pounced on him like wild animals. I knew war was a killer, but does it turn men into such hideous fiends? Shame clouding his eyes, Karna bent his handsome head abjectly. I have no justifications, Uruvi. You are my conscience, but all I can say is that I followed my commander-in-chief's instructions, he said impassively. That was my duty, I could not disobey him. As guided by him, I aimed at the reins of Abhimanyu's horses and cut them off, forcing the lad to the ground. After that, it was mayhem. He was attacked from behind, his bow was broken, and his horses and charioteer killed. He stood on the ground alone, with just a sword and a shield in hand. Guru Dronacharya broke his sword, and I his shield, Karna continued, closing his eyes as if to blank out the horrific image. Arjuna's son then took up a chariot's wheel as his only weapon and whirled it like a discus, trying to ward off our arrows. Finally, exhausted and spent, he was overpowered by Dushasana, who came up from behind and closed on him in combat. Both fell down and Abhimanyu struggled to get up, but before he could stand up, Dushasana crushed his head with a blow from his mace. Karna paused, his voice thick with emotion. He could not go on, for the sight still haunted him. He forced himself to continue. And then Dushasana and the others danced around his lifeless body, shouting in glee. I couldn't bear it any more and I turned away, but it was Yuyutsu, the Kaurava prince, who eventually shouted at them to stop that horrible victory dance. Uruvi, I stand guilty again. Oh, God help me, how many more sins am I going to be accountable for? And like I said before, Arjuna deserves his revenge and I deserve the death that will fall on me. Uruvi gazed at her husband. His face was ghostly in its pallor, his eyes bleak. She asked herself what torment he must be going through. His hopes had been destroyed and despair had broken his spirit. Karna did not look at her. His vacant eyes rested on the distant battlefield in the still of the moonless night. He was a crushed man, a still figure in his silent, heartbreaking anguish. He made no protest and showed no resentment. He seemed to accept life's stinging blow as the ordinary course of things. Life had extracted everything from him, shred him limb from limb and then hurled him cruelly on a blood-soaked battlefield. Uruvi recalled his high spirits, his vitality, his wry humor, his sardonic, lopsided smile and his confidence in his future, and she wept silently for him, for she knew all her love was no balm for him. In revenge for the vicious killing of his beloved son, Arjuna proclaimed that he would kill Jayadrath, the Sindhu king and Duryodhana's brother-in-law, by sunset that day. His announcement sent chills of apprehension through the Kaurava army. It was an open challenge. Arjuna twanged his Gandiva bow and Krishna blew his Panchanya conch. The 14th day was the bloodiest day of the Kurukshetra war, with Arjuna, impassioned with anger and his grief, single-handedly killing lakhs of warriors who tried to protect Jayadrath. And true to his word, Arjuna's oath was fulfilled. The entire Kaurava army, with its great warriors, converged around the Sindhu king to protect him all through the day, and when the sun set, cheered in triumph that Arjuna had not been able to keep his vow. But the sight of the sun setting against the reddened sky was a mere illusion cast by Lord Krishna, immediately catching the Sindhu king and his protective shield of soldiers off guard. Using the Pashupada Astra of Lord Shiva, Arjuna shot a shaft from his Gandiva bow straight and true, striking the Sindhu king's head, which rolled down to the ground, severed completely from his body. Jayadrath, the man responsible for his son's death, lay dead on the battlefield before the sun had set. Arjuna's oath had been redeemed, forcing Uruvi to recall another terrible vow sworn by Arjuna, that he would slay Karna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Each day was like a sword waiting to fall, stretching its hours towards the deadly end. That same evening of the 14th day, another hero plunged to his death. Ghatotkacha, the son of Bhima and his wife Hidimba, was a Rakshasa, a demon, but a brave one and a master of illusory weapons. He could even grow into an awesome size by his own will. Using his sheer height, he had destroyed entire divisions of the enemy, dueling fiercely with veterans like Ashwadhama and Karna and even defeating warriors like Duryodhana. He wreaked such terrible havoc that Duryodhana finally pleaded with Karna to use the Shakti missile which Karna had reserved to use on Arjuna during the final, fatal confrontation between him and the Pandava prince. It was that divine weapon gifted to him by Lord Indra in exchange for the Kavach and Kundals. Karna took up his position and, in one mighty throw, hurled the mighty missile at Ghatotkacha. The young demon fell at once with a resounding crash on an entire division of the enemy, killing more than 4 lakh warriors. The Shakti Astra was meant for Arjuna, but was destined to kill the unfortunate Ghatotkacha instead. Krishna had cleverly used the demon son of Bhima as a sacrifice to save the life of Arjuna, once again resorting to a ruse. Uruvi counted each rule flagrantly broken by the so-called righteous side. Her anger seethed from day to day as the restraints of Dharma were discarded in many vile deceptions. The killing of Guru Dronacharya was the ultimate breach of trust, reeking of treachery. On the eve of the fateful 15th day of the war, Guru Dronacharya, smarting under Duryodhana's allegation that he was a traitor and biased towards the Pandavas, decided to use the deadly Brahmadanda weapon, which was more powerful than the mighty Brahmastra, but the Guru had not imparted the knowledge of how to use it to either his favorite pupil, Arjuna, or his beloved son, Ashwatthama. This knowledge made Dronacharya invincible that day. There was no one who could defeat the Guru, and the only hope was taking advantage of his sole weakness, his son, Ashwatthama. Krishna knew that once he heard that his beloved son was dead, Dronacharya would voluntarily desist from battle, throw down his weapons and give up his life. That would be the moment of the great kill. But for this deed, someone would have to mouth the terrible lie that Ashwatthama had been killed. Krishna told Bhima to kill an elephant named Ashwatthama, and then announced that he had killed him, using only the animal's name, so that Dronacharya would believe that his son was dead. Yudhishthira was told to say his first lie ever by seconding Bhima's assertion. So Bhima slaughtered the elephant and went up to Dronacharya, saying with glee, "I have killed Ashwatthama." Shocked with disbelief, the Guru turned trustingly to the most truthful man of all, Yudhishthira. It was then that the Pandava king admitted the half-truth. "Yes," he declared. "Ashwatthama, the elephant," he said in an undertone, "is dead." Stricken with sorrow and believing his son was dead only because the news was uttered by the honest Yudhishthira, the Guru quietly gave up his weapons, surrendering his will to fight and to live. In a grief-stricken trance, he sat down to meditate. Seizing the moment when the Guru was defenseless, Drishtadyumna, the prince born out of fire for the sole purpose of killing Dronacharya, climbed onto the Guru's unmoving chariot and unsheathing his sword, beheaded him in one fell stroke. And so it was that yet another rule of war was flouted. Karna bowed to the Guru's lifeless body, and after a long pause, commented, "Unemotionally, we get what we deserve. The flames of the fire once started are going to burn you someday. We shall all die a death we deserve. We shall die as we lived, in deceit and duplicity. I know that Guru Dronacharya was killed treacherously, but this was the same noble warrior who had ordered Abhimanyu to be attacked from behind and killed when he was vulnerable. All our deeds have come full circle, it is the order of things that we have perpetuated. So be it. Death would be a mercy. It would be everlasting peace." It was as if Karna was waiting for his turn now.